Dougal dug his fingers into the wall and climbed faster and faster. To keep from slipping, he stabbed his fingers into the crumbling masonry over and over again. He scraped his hands raw, forcing handholds in his race to reach the top. He could hear Ember clearly now. "Traitor!" she bellowed, and there was the clash of metal again. Dougal redoubled his effort. Dougal clawed his way to the top of the pit in time to see Riona standing, facing the char. Parts of her bright armour had been ripped away, and she had claw marks along her exposed arms. Ember was worse off. Her heavy blade was knocked aside, and she clutched her bleeding midsection, struggling to hold her insides together. As Dougal watched, Ember managed a curse, spitting blood, and dropped to her knees, then fell forward. Dougal climbed over the edge and rose to his feet as a nasty grin split Riona's face. "It always makes me so happy to see a char die." Dougal's ebony blade sprang from its sheath, and he held it before him, his raw fingers smearing its hilt. "Don't make me hurt you, Riona," he said. "Just give me the claw." Riona wheeled, surprised by Dougal's appearance. As he watched, her expression turned from rage to a softness. "Dougal," she said, "I misread you. You have much more determination than even I suspected. I'm sorry I left you down there." She did not lower the claw, but moved to her right. Dougal stepped away from the edge of the pit and circled her. "This is your chance, Dougal," said Riona. "We go our separate ways. You go back to Divinity's Reach or Lion's Arch or wherever. You survived Ascalon City twice. You have gems and gold to prove it. And while the Char legions tear each other apart, you can just wait for the dust to settle and for the humans to come back. All you have to do is walk away." "I'm afraid I can't do that," said Dougal. "You know that." Riona came at him, whipping the Ung around as she charged. Dougal realised that some of the bloody scratches were not from Ember, but from the claw itself. Riona was an amateur with the blade, and could injure herself just as easily as she could wound him. Yet, she could not drop it to pull her own sword. Dougal countered her attack with a flurry of blows, but try as he might, he could not find a way past the claw's 4 blades. While Riona might not know how to handle an Ung, Dougal stood before her beaten and exhausted, the blood from his fingers making his blade hard to handle. She'd always been the better soldier, and that edge proved enough to keep him from hurting her. Dougal backed up again, giving himself some more room from the claw's blades, and hoping that Riona might trip on the uneven paving stones when coming after him. The blades of the claw flashed at him again and again, and it was all he could do to mount a decent defence against them. Every time he thought he might see a space for a counterattack, Riona closed it in an instant. Sometimes this meant cutting her own flesh with one of the other blades, but she didn't seem to care. He kept backing up slowly, buying himself time with space, circling as he moved, putting her between the pit and himself. "Just walk away, Dougal!" Riona looked straight into his eyes. "I'll let you go for old time's sake. I'm taking the claw either way. You don't have to die." She launched herself at him. Dougal turned just in time to parry her attack. One of the claw's blades got past his guard and ripped a shallow channel in his leg. Furiously, Riona pressed the attack, slicing and stabbing at Dougal with abandon. He stumbled backward, over the stones, deflecting the most lethal of her blows. She was forcing him to move now, spinning him so his back was to the pit and his form was framed in the light of the foe fire. He was the perfect target, which is what he wanted to be. Riona let out a guttural cry that might have been a curse or a threat or a prayer and charged him, her blades lashing out and laying open his left shoulder. That's when Dougal struck, despite the pain, at Riona's heart. She managed to half parry the blow, and it slashed through her side rather than into her chest. But More importantly, she had to twist to ward off the blow, and her own charge carried her forward to the edge of the pit. She slashed again at Dougal, and he raised his blade again, piercing Riona's chest through its chain links halfway up the blade's length. Riona's eyes went wide with the shock, and she began to pitch backward, Dougal's name on her bloody lips, his sword still lodged in her chest. Dougal let go of his sword and reached beyond the length of the blade. He grabbed the claw of the Carneur from Riona's tightly locked fingers and pulled. The claw came free, but Riona kept arching backward, back into the pit. She fell without making a sound, disappearing into the light. Dougal did not hear her land. Dougal sat on the edge of the pit, breathing deeply, clutching the ung. His shoulder wept blood, and tears streamed down his face. A deep chuffing noise behind him shocked him and told him that Ember had not fully given up the fight. He staggered over and slapped his pockets, at last finding the potion that Cranks had given him. He rolled Ember onto her back and poured the liquid between her lips, then took a swig himself. It tasted like concentrated cranberry syrup, but he could feel a warmth in his leg and shoulder, a tingling as the damaged flesh tried to knit itself together. He poured the remaining potion down the char's throat, and Ember let out a long, coughing jag, then rolled over and vomited bits of her own flesh. She touched the skin beneath her slashed belly armor to make sure her flesh was solid. "The traitor!" spat Ember. "Dead," said Dougal, and looked over at the pit. "I'm gonna need a new sword, again." Ember growled and nodded, then said, "What about you, Dougal Keen?" What about me? Despite the potion, Dougal ached and knew that, if it came to it, he could not fight a Char one-on-one. "Are you going to return with me to the vigil and give the claw of the Carneur to Almora's Soulkeeper?" The Char's words sounded hostile, but she looked concerned. Dougal could not guess what the Char was thinking, but slowly nodded. "I'd like to do that." A toothy smile spread over Ember's face. "Good. Even with your kindness of a healing draught, I am in no shape to fight you." "So, you do want to go back?" said Dougal. "Of course," said Ember. "I do not think I could face my grandmother empty-handed." "Grandmother?" Dougal was startled. "Almora is—" "I have her eyes," said Ember, smiling weakly. "Though my mother was Ashlegion, don't tell me that is not obvious even to a human." There was a great shout from the far side of the courtyard, and both man and Char looked up, surprised. Garlic staggered into view. "I don't believe it," muttered Ember. "I do," said Dougal. The Norn was pale, his massive form almost drained of life. Not an inch of his outfit was not shredded, and not an inch of his exposed flesh was not bleeding. His warrior's braid was burned off to a charcoal stump, and he was, as they were, covered with a thin coating of pulverized bone. But he was alive. "By the bear!" shouted the Norn. "Did you kill them all without me? The Asura did a wonderful thing, for his device gave me wings. I awoke in the remains of one of the houses and tried to find you." He paused a moment, then admitted with a shrug, "I'm afraid I got lost. I wasn't paying much attention on the way in." Dougal wanted to hug the Norn and lumbered forward, but Ember beat him to it, embracing the Norn and slapping his back. Gullick winced, but got his vengeance slapping the Char on the back as well. "Where is he?" said Gullick. "Where is that powerful Asura?" Dougal's face fell, and Ember said, "He's dead. Cranks died defeating Adalburn." Gullick grew somber immediately. "I see. Did he die well?" Dougal said, "It was a death worth a legendary tale." "One I would very much like to hear," said Gullick softly. "And Riona?" Dougal and Ember looked at each other. Then Ember said, "She's gone as well." Gullick lowered himself onto the ground. "I am afraid," he said, "that I have to find less fragile friends." The three of them were silent for a moment, in the heart of the dead city. "Do you still have your satchel, Norn?" asked Ember. "Of course," said Gullick, and shuffled the pack out of one shoulder. "We need to put something away," said the Char, and Dougal hefted the claw. Gullick raised an eyebrow. "So this is what all the fuss was about? Was it worth the deaths of friends?" "Nothing ever is," said Dougal. "But since you have space in your satchel, there is a bag filled with platinum coins halfway down that pit, and more in a treasure room beyond. But we'd best be quick, before Adalbern reforms his ghostly body and marshals his troops." Gullick rose to his feet. "Let him," he snorted. "I will take out my rage against him in Cranks' name. Still," and a smile played over his face, "the only thing better than returning from a city of the dead is to return from a city of the dead bearing great treasures. Down here, you say?" He walked to the edge of the pit. Dougal laid the claw in Gullick's satchel. There was more than enough room for several more sacks, and he would have to scare up another sword as well. To Ember, he said, "He's right, you know. It hardly looks like something worth all the worry." "How so?" asked Ember. "I expected some legendary weapon, like Magdea itself," said Dougal. "Something all-powerful and magical. It's just a gaudy toy." Ember made a chuffing noise that Dougal now knew to be laughter. "It is more than a weapon. It is a key. The key by which we will unlock the chance for peace between our peoples, and with that, a chance to defeat the Elder Dragons. It does not get more important than that." Dougal nodded and closed the bag over the claw. "We still have to get back," he said. "We will assault that bridge when we get to it, Dougal Keen," said the Char, and put a large paw on the human's shoulder. Gullick let out a cry. "Are you two old women going to swap tender lies, or are you going to help? Someone mentioned treasure down there, and if Adalbern is still around, I want to take his best tableware." The Char and human laughed, and together they walked to the pit's edge. They had much yet to do.